Well, good morning, everybody. If you don't know me, my name is Brandon Reynolds. I'm the preaching intern here. And today we are going to get into our summer series that is going to carry us through the whole summer. It's a two-part series. We're starting in the book of Daniel, following along with VBS, and then we're going to move into 1 Peter in the month of July. And one theme remains constant throughout both the book of Daniel and the book of 1 Peter, and that is that this world is not our home. We are living as exiles. And there's a lot that comes with that. What is an exile? What does it mean to be an exile? Why are we exiles? And we're going to answer all of those questions as we walk through this series, as we walk through all of these different trials that come with being one, living in a nation, living in a world that is not holy, yet we are those who are called to be holy. And so we're going to try to address all of those as we walk through our series, but I want to try to address a specific question today. Why? Why be an exile? The simple answer is that God commands it, but I'm not satisfied with that answer. I was never satisfied when I asked my parents, why should I do this? And they said, because I said so. That wasn't enough for me. And so in the very same, because God says so, while true, is not enough for me. So why should I be an exile? This life is difficult. I don't want to be living in a nation that doesn't love the things I love. I don't want to be living in a world that doesn't care about the things I love. It's difficult. It is a hard calling to be an exile. So why should we even do it? Why not just conform? Isn't that easier? Won't that make my life better? Well, that's what we're going to be wrestling with today. And that is a question that we have all had to wrestle with at some point. Should I do what the world says I should do? Or should I resist? Should I give in where the world says I should give in? After all, it's just a little command. Why shouldn't I just lie every now and then? Why shouldn't I be a little bit greedy? It's hard to get by in this world. Why shouldn't I seek why shouldn't I seek to gather more things? Why shouldn't I just lust just a little bit? After all, it's only natural, right? It's what my body wants. Why resist all these things? Well, that is not just a problem that we deal with in the 21st century. This idea of being exiles has been present for all of history. Ever since man was kicked out of the garden, man has been living in a world that is not his home. And specifically, the book of Daniel. We're going to start in Daniel chapter 1. And we're going to read a few verses, and then I'm going to give some context before we get into our actual lesson text for today. But I just want us to know that Daniel, these people are actually in exile. Look at Daniel chapter 1, verses 1 through 5 say this. In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, with some of the vessels of the house of God. And he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and placed the vessels in the treasury of his God. Then the king commanded Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of the Israel, both of the royal family and of the nobility, youths without blemish, of good appearance and skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, and competent to stand in the king's palace, and to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. The king assigned them a daily portion of the food that the king ate, and of the wine that he drank. They were to be educated for 3 years, and at the end of the time, they were to stand before the king. Now, keeping in mind that these people are in exile, they were taken out of their home, they were stolen from their home, They actually seem to be in a pretty good situation, these young men that are being brought into the king's palace. They're living all right. They have the food that they need. They have shelter. They're being taken care of. They're being educated. The king obviously doesn't want to just kill them off. They're being well taken care of. And so at a surface level glance, it looks like these people are doing all right. It looks like they have no reason to resist any of this. It looks like the king is looking out for them. It looks like the king doesn't want these people to hate him or to hate Babylon. It looks like he's trying to make allies out of these people at first glance. But there's some important context to this story that we need to get into before we get into the story. And that context comes from Leviticus chapter 19. Verses 1 through 2, and it is 2 simple verses with one simple command. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to all the congregation of the people of Israel, and say to them, You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." This Babylon thing would have been a lot easier without that command. Daniel and his friends could have conformed. Could have been just like the people of Babylon. They could have said, yeah, we'll eat what you eat. We'll do what you do. We will be who you are. Because after all, we've been drug into this situation, so we might as well make the best of it. Yet, they and all of the Israelites who have been thrown into exile have the command from God to be holy, to be different, to be set apart for a higher purpose. They're not just those who live as the world lives. They're not just those who have been called to survive, to get by, to do the best they can. They are those who have been called to be holy. And in this situation, that means they have been called to be exiles. Not just to be exiles, but to live as exiles. And so they have a problem. They have an issue. And that is that they are called to be holy in the midst of an unholy land. The Babylonians don't care about Yahweh. The Babylonians are in the most curious about Yahweh, but they have their own gods. They're satisfied with their own gods. They believe that their own gods are stronger than the God of Israel. And so why would they care about this God? That God clearly isn't powerful because he let the Jews be delivered to the Babylonians. And yet, these young men thrown into exile have this challenge placed before them. Are you going to conform, or are you going to be holy? And so, the story continues in the rest of the chapter, or not in the rest of chapter 1, but specifically in verses, 6 through 10. Among these, the young men who were taken from Israel and brought into the king's kingdom were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah of the tribe of Judah. If you didn't know their Israelite names, now you do. Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael. And the chief of the eunuchs gave them names. Daniel he called Belteshazzar. Hananiah he called Shadrach. Mishael he called Meshach. And Azariah he called Abednego. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Therefore, he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. And God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who assigned your food and your drink. For why should he see that you are in worse condition than the youths who are of your own age? So you would endanger my head with the king. Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself. Daniel has placed his stake in the ground. He said, I am going to be holy. I'm not going to be like you Babylonians. And you would think that would be would cause up anger in Ashpenaz. You would think that would light Ashpenaz's fire. You think he would say, you horrible people, you pathetic people, you refuse to conform to our ways, you refuse to do what we do, you refuse to say what we say, to eat what we eat, what is wrong with you? But instead, he makes a pretty logical argument. He says, if you don't eat what we eat, you're going to be in worse condition than those around you. Isn't that an interesting response? I think that response is a mirror response to how the world tells us we ought to live. How the world critiques our religion. Sometimes it comes in yelling and screaming, but a whole lot more often it says, you realize this is just wasting your life, right? The world comes to us and says, religion is a crutch for the weak. You're only using religion because you can't face the reality, you can't face the facts that all we are is evolved dust and we're going to die and it'll be over. You're too weak to face that. Or the world comes to us and says, why would you follow this religion? It limits you. You can't live life how you were meant to live life. You can't go and experience every pleasure that you want to. You have to give some of your money away? Why would you ever do that? You can't be obsessed with earthly possessions? Well, that's not the way to get by in this world. You have to curb sexual desire? That's not the way of this world. No, you need to embrace sexual desire. Absolutely. You're ruining your life because you're choosing to be holy. Why would you, as a Christian, choose to be in worse condition than those around you? That is what the world argues. They don't argue that our religion is bad. They argue that our religion is ruining our lives. Just like Ashpenaz, they say, because you are religious, because you are holy, you are experiencing a worse life than those around you. Why would you appear in worse condition than the other youths of your age? This difficulty of the challenge to be holiness is not hard because the world hates us. It's hard because the world thinks we're wrong. It's hard because the world has their own way of doing things, and our way isn't that. The difficulty of being set apart is that you have to be set apart. You have to be different. You can't be what everyone else is. You can't do what everyone else does. You can't think how the world thinks. We don't love the things they love. We don't do the things they do, and yet we're surrounded by it constantly. So why be an exile? Why not just give in? It seems a whole lot easier. This challenge is presented to Daniel of why not just give in. He's put his stake in the ground. He said, I'm not going to defile myself. And Ashpenaz makes a good point. Why would you appear weaker than the rest? And we're going to read the whole rest of the story in chapter 1, and I'm going to pull 2 points from it. So if you would, Daniel chapter 1, starting in verse 11. Then Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had assigned over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance and the appearance of the youths who eat the king's food be observed by you, and deal with your servants according to what you see. So he listened to them in this manner, and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, it was seen that they were better in appearance and fatter in flesh than all the youths who ate the king's food. So the steward took away their food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables. As for these 4 youths, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. At the end of the time, when the king had commanded that they should be brought into the inn, the chief of eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king spoke with them, And among all of them, none were found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore, they stood before the king. And in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters that were in all his kingdom. And Daniel was there until the first year of King Cyrus. 2 points from this. Point 1. While the world may say, why would you appear in worse condition than those around you? Reality is that we have the secret to the good life. We have the thing that the world is constantly searching for. Even though the world may claim that they've got it all figured out, even though they may claim that true life is life spent chasing every desire, chasing every pleasure, chasing every momentary thing, deep down, they're all longing for something deeper, and they don't have it, and they're confused by it. And so when they see us willing to be holy, willing to throw all that stuff away because we have found something greater, it confuses them. The church so often listens to the voice of the world and begrudgingly takes on the challenge of holiness. You say, I'll be holy because I have to. I'll be different because I have to. I'll be different because I guess Jesus died for me and that makes me obligated to be good. But that is not the attitude that we should take to this life. The life that God has commanded us to live, the life that we get to live because of Jesus Christ, is a good life. It is the good life. It's the one life that the world wishes they could have, but because they reject Jesus, they don't know how to get it. Because he's the only way to get it. The other men did not appear as good as Daniel and his friends because it turns out the commands of God are actually for the good of his people. The other young men from the nation, the other men who conformed, chose the world. They chose to crack. They decided that holiness wasn't worth it. And because of that, it doesn't say they experienced bad lives, but they didn't experience the goodness that God had waiting for them. They didn't experience the reward because they didn't choose to live the difficult challenge. They didn't choose to do the hard thing, so they never got the good thing. Oftentimes, I think we take the same attitude. We look at our faith and we say, I'll do it because I have to. Not, I'll do it because it's good. When reality is that Jesus not only died to redeem you from your sin, but he died to free you from it. Jesus died not only to bring you into this new life, but so that you can live this new life, so that you can live out the goodness of this life with Christ. Jesus didn't die to bring you into a relationship with God because God needed it. He died to bring you into a relationship with God because you needed it. And just like these young men, when we choose to be holy in an unholy land, we get to live out the good life that the world just doesn't understand. My second point from this. Look at verse 21. This is a verse that I read over so many times and didn't pay any attention to when I was first reading the story. And Daniel was there until the first year of King Cyrus. When I was prepping this sermon, I was like, I'll just leave that verse out. There's no point. There's no point from that verse. But there is absolutely a point from that verse. God sustains these men in exile, but he does not remove them from it. If I were these men, I'd say, God, if you're going to work a miracle, why don't you just take us out of here? If you're going to put something in motion, if you're going to maybe, work awesome power, why doesn't your awesome power work to get us out of exile and back into our home? But God doesn't do that. He chooses to leave these young men in exile until the first year of King Cyrus. Daniel doesn't get to go home. He has to stay. He lives in exile. And so while God's power might be present in the midst of exile, while God might sustain them through the process of exile, he doesn't deliver them from it. And the question remains for me, why? And that's where the salt and light section of this sermon comes from. So if you would, go to Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 through 16, which says this: "You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." It would have been easier to just take them out of exile. It would have been easier for them, and it probably would have been an easier situation for God too. The Israelites complain a lot when they're in exile. He has a lot he has to deal with too. But the reality remains that those living in exile do not just have a challenge, but they have an opportunity. We who are living in exile do not just have a challenge, but we have an opportunity. What is the opportunity? To show the world Jesus. To show the world the good life. Because these young men chose to stand for something, because they chose to be holy, Ashpenaz had to witness the power of Yahweh. He looked at these young men and said, "Well, we have our way." And they said, "We have our way. Let us test the two." And the life of holiness comes out on top. I'm sure Ashpenaz was thinking about that. In the same way, when the world looks at us and we choose to be holy, even though it might not be easy, even though it might not always be fun, even though it might not always feel like the good life, when they see us and they see the result of our good life and they see our good deeds, what is the only response but to glorify our Father who is in heaven? That is going to be one of the major themes throughout the entire book of Daniel and throughout this entire series, is that when you are holy, when you do good, when you live life as Christ commanded it, not only does it benefit you, but the whole world benefits because of it. This world that is so desperate for something better, so desperate for something deeper, so desperate for a good life, when they see you and they see that you have it, they have to reckon with the fact that they don't. And they have to reckon with what is different about that person. When we choose to live out Jesus, we choose to be salt in this world. God didn't remove the young men from exile, and God doesn't remove us from exile, because without us, the world would have no salt. There'd be no flavor. There'd be nothing interesting. God doesn't remove us from the world because the world needs us. I think that's a pretty good way to look at it. Instead of thinking about myself, instead of thinking about why isn't my life easier, why doesn't God help me get the fun thing or me get the easy thing, why doesn't God just take me out of this, I'm tired of it, we can look at the world and say, man, how badly do they need an example of salt and light? How badly do they need an example of holiness? Because they are broken, it is so clear to see. They know it, and we know it. And we, as those who have the answer, are called to live out that answer unapologetically. We're not called to begrudgingly live out holiness. We are not called to live out holiness because God said so. We are called to live out holiness because it is good for us and it is good for them. And when we do it as a community and we do it well, the whole world benefits. Whether they be in the church or out of it, because they see Jesus. living in you and I. So this week, as you go into your week, I want to challenge you to be thinking about this question: why be an exile? And remember the answers from the book of Daniel and from Matthew. Answer number one is because being an exile is good for you. Being an exile is a chance to live out the good life that Jesus offers you. Why be holy? Because it's good to be holy. Why be different? Because it's good to be different. It's clear that those who aren't like us don't have it all solved. They haven't got it figured out. So when the chance comes and the moment comes where you say, why am I even doing this? Why am I even living as a Christian? This is too difficult. This is too annoying. This requires too much for me. Remember that it requires much, but it also gives much. The life as a Christian is a good life. You have God, you have each other, you have Jesus, and you have hope. Some things that the world is sorely lacking in. And on the same tune, just as living a holy life is good for you, remind yourself that living a holy life is good for the world too, even though they may not see it. Remind yourself that when the world sees you this week, and you are tempted to give into their ways, you are tempted to be angry, be greedy, be lustful, be any of the things that the world calls you to just to live into, because that's who you really are. Remember that the world needs you to be an example. Just as Daniel and his friends were and will so many more times be to the Babylonians as we go through this series, you will see that Daniel and his friends shock the Babylonians over and over and over again because of their dedication and because of the goodness of God in response. The world will feel the same way when we choose to be holy. Even though it's difficult, even though it's not always fun, even though sometimes it is frustrating beyond belief. The world has no choice but to look at us and say there's something about them that is different. And when we do it really well, they'll say it's something that I want. Jesus is the only means by which we can live a good life. We can live an easy life without him. We can live a fun life without him. We can live a pleasurable life without him, sure, but that is not a good life. A good life is caught up wholly and fully in having access to the presence of God and being those who are holy, even when it's not easy, even when it's not fun, because we know that we are the salt of the earth. We know that the earth needs us. We know that we are the light on the hill. We know that we are the ones that show the world how things ought to be in the midst of all their blindness. And when we truly live as those who are salt and light, the world can't help but respond by looking to Jesus and saying, that's what I need. This week, I have a challenge. And I've thought a lot about what I want this challenge to be. But I think this is the ultimate conclusion of what I have, how we can accurately live this Daniel challenge out in our world today. My challenge for you this week is at some point, pray in public. Whether you're out to eat with your family, pray before dinner. Find an opportunity, whether you're at work and you just need a little pick-me-up, pray at work. If your coworker is in trouble, ask them if you can pray for them. If your coworker needs a pick-me-up, ask if you can pray for them. It's going to be awkward, absolutely, but it can't be more awkward than asking the nation who took you into exile whether you can eat your own food. Part of being holy is being different. And different is going to be awkward sometimes, but it's always good. So as you go into this week, find a time to pray where you can be seen. And don't be like the Pharisees, right? Matthew chapter 5 can't be separated from Matthew chapter 6, where you pray for your own righteousness. No. But pray because when the world sees your good deeds, they will glorify your Father who is in heaven. The elders and the prayer leaders can go ahead and go to your spots. If you don't know about this Jesus guy, if you don't know about holiness or about all of the stuff that I've kind of talked about today, we would love to talk to you about Jesus and how he changes everything. We would love to talk to you about how Jesus gives us access to the good life and about how you can get access to that very same life. If you are just in need of prayer, that is why we have these people. Part of living into the good life is trusting other Christians to bear your burdens. So don't hesitate. If you are in need, find somebody and pray with them. And join with me as we stand and as we sing.